Welcome, everyone. We are just letting people in and then we will get started. So we'll give it about probably a minute or so and then get started. Good morning, everyone. Looks like people are still popping in, but we'll go ahead and start here. Got a big group so far. So thank you for joining us today. I am Heather Tritton. I'm the president and CEO of the Colorado Children's Campaign. We're very excited to have you all here for our end of session webinar. It's been a long and exciting 120 days of the legislative session, and we are excited to be here today to kind of let you know how things shook out for kids at the legislature this year. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn about this and really be engaged throughout. This is our third of a three-part series of webinars. So also just to say thank you for all those of you who've kind of followed along throughout the session, have answered our alerts and been really engaged in how kids are faring at the Capitol. As we all know, the things that happen at the Capitol have a great impact on how kids are doing in Colorado, and this year has been a very interesting year. So we are thrilled to be here at this point today. Today we are going to really discuss how things ended up. These are our four key priority areas. I think a lot of you have seen this slide over and over, but just to reiterate, these are the areas we work in and that we're going to discuss today. So K-12 education, early childhood, health, and economic security. We know that these are areas that are deeply interconnected and really are critical to shaping the well-being of children and families across our state. So throughout this whole session, each of these areas also came with its own set of challenges and excitement, requiring some thoughtful and strategic advocacy in order for us to drive some meaningful change. And we are going to have updates both on our key priorities as well as bills that cross the finish line at the Capitol. So we're going to just have a few updates on things that are not bills throughout this. We are going to pop in a link to our bill tracker for the session. And throughout this whole webinar, we're going to be putting some links in the chat. And we're also recording this, and we will send out a copy of the recording. This is one of my favorite slides. We've updated this one for each of our webinars as well. So in total, during the session, we had more than 730 bills and resolutions that were introduced. 444 of those have already been sent to the governor for his consideration, and he has already vetoed two bills. One being the social media bill that got a lot of press that the legislature tried to override and failed to do so. If we had to point at one big thing that shaped a lot of our work this year, it would be a tight budget. I think we've talked about this on each of our webinars as well. So the state had some pretty tough budget realities, and we were facing a fiscal environment with lawmakers needing to make over $1 billion in budget reductions in order to achieve balance, which they have to constitutionally do. So while that didn't mean that there was no funding for anything, it did mean that we were facing a situation where resources for new programs or for trying to expand programs was really limited, and the Joint Budget Committee was really having to make some tough decisions about how to move things forward. Programs across the state did see budget cuts, but programs for kids were largely protected, and many actually saw some increases, and we're going to talk about that today. And I just want to say that is because we have an incredible legislature that is very committed to children and a joint budget committee that really, really supports the programs and understands the programs that support kids and want to ensure that kids are doing well in our state. So, a lot of our advocacy actually focused on protecting progress and safeguarding programs and policies that support low income families, that ensure students receive a quality education, and that uphold critical services. So, that meant protecting things like the new school funding formula, universal pre K, health insurance for undocumented kids, and cash assistance for families living in extreme poverty. And we're going to touch on all of those things today. So, the advocacy that we did, the advocacy that you all did, the advocacy that legislators did, it all mattered so much during this 2025 session. So we really want to just take a second to say thank you to all of our partners, our fellow advocates, and legislators who really worked tirelessly for the last 4 months on behalf of kids. We would not be here without all of us coming together and pushing forward. And I would be remiss if I didn't also just shout out to the team at the Colorado Children's Campaign who's been working really hard for the last 4 months as well. So I want to give kudos to them too. We did a lot this last 4 months in the face of adversity, and because of the advocacy of all of us, more students are going to receive the support they need to succeed in school. More children are going to enter kindergarten ready to learn. More children are going to have access to health coverage and care in our state. And families that are living in deep poverty are going to have more resources to meet their basic needs. And then this is like, I feel like this slide is our scoreboard. But just a few numbers to wrap up the session. We did see a more than $250 million increase in K-12 funding, something you've probably seen a lot in the news in the last little while here. We're very excited about that. Through January of 2025, we have over 42,000 kids enrolled in our universal pre-K program, and we are now third in the nation for the number of 4-year-olds being served by public preschool. We have over 16,000. I actually think we got an email yesterday saying over 18,000 kids and pregnant adults with insurance under Coverall Coloradans. And our monthly cash assistance for TANF families, which are our lowest income families, was increased to $620, which is a 4.8% increase. So just a quick snapshot of some highlights of this session. And now we are going to get into the details, and I am going to hand this over to Maddie.
Thanks so much, Heather. Good morning, everyone. My name is Maddie Ashore. I am the Director of K-12 Education at the Colorado Children's Campaign. I always like to say that I was born and raised in Colorado and attended D11 schools, and it's a real honor to be here at the campaign, making sure that all Colorado kids have the same opportunities that I got to have. So the top legislative priority in the 2025 legislative session was the implementation of the new school funding formula that we enacted in last session 2024. As a reminder, the school funding formula is just the math problem that the state uses to divvy up the 10 billion-ish that we spend in public education each year across the state's 178 school districts. Advocates worked for decades to update the school funding formula because the 1994 formula was 30 years old and largely benefited property wealthy communities, which exacerbated funding and learning outcomes and disparities. There are 3 things to remember and understand about the new school funding formula that was passed in 2024. First, the new formula reverses the order of operations, which makes our new school funding formula much more student-centered. It considers student characteristics before district characteristics. Student-centered funding formulas have really great track records across the states and the globe in improving outcomes, not just in specific student groups, but sort of across the board. Second, the new funding formula more than doubled the weights or the additional funding increase that schools get for students living in poverty, students who are learning English, and students with special learning needs. And third, the new funding formula capped the cost of living factor, which was the piece of the formula that was driving those big inequities that we saw. And this will help redirect hundreds of millions of dollars to kids who are learning to speak English, living in poverty, or who have special learning needs across the state. It's hard to overstate how much of a win this new funding formula is for kids. If we can make it stick, it'll be the biggest investment in K-12 education that we have made as a state since Amendment 23 in 2005, to the tune of an additional $500 million per year for K-12 schools. However, just a few months after this enormous victory, the state reset the property tax rate in the August 2024 special session, which prompted a $1.2 billion budget shortfall and deeply threatened this big progress that we'd made toward a more equitable school funding system. So throughout the 2025 session, policymakers and school district leaders worked tirelessly to find a way to build on the progress of the new school funding formula without busting the state budget this year. And the compromise that they came to is House Bill 251320. So House Bill 251320 is this year's School Finance Act. There are two bills that the legislature has to pass each year, the long bill or the state budget and the School Finance Act. And this year's School Finance Act does three important things. So first, it begins implementation of the new school funding formula enacted last session. But to accommodate the budget shortfall and reduce some strain on the general fund and the state education fund, which are the two big pots of money that the state uses to pay for K-12 education, House Bill 1320 extends the implementation or the phase-in period of the new formula by 1 year. Second, House Bill 1320 begins phasing out enrollment averaging. And this was the biggest contention point in this year's school finance negotiations. So enrollment averaging is a school district accounting practice in which a district reports an average of the previous 4 years of enrollment to the state for their per pupil funding. This helps district maintain staffing and some flexibility and stability when they're facing big enrollment drops, which cause big funding drops. A lot of Colorado districts are in this position right now, facing declining enrollment. However, this accounting practice, does result in double funding students to the tune of about $190 million per year. So the governor, faced with both this big shortfall and a serious call to increase school funding this year, proposed eliminating enrollment averaging and using or reinvesting the $190 million savings into the school funding formula, the new school funding formula. But school districts pushed back, arguing that moving from 4-year to current year averaging just in 1 year amounted to a big cut in K-12 education and felt like the rug was being pulled out from under them. So after months of negotiations, a compromise was reached. This year, districts will continue to use 4-year enrollment averaging. Next year, we'll step down to 3-year enrollment averaging, but only if the state invests more dollars into the new school funding formula at about 30%. And then the following years will be determined by the balance in the state education fund and the amount of additional dollars that the state is able to invest into the new funding formula. So third, and probably most importantly to the folks on this call, as Heather mentioned, House Bill 1320 increases K-12 appropriations by $256 million-ish this year, which is kind of incredible in a $1.2 billion budget shortfall. It also ensures that no school districts take a cut or see a funding reduction this year by holding all schools harmless to their 2024-25 funding levels. This was a big win, and we're really happy that the legislature and school district leaders were able to find a path forward for the new school funding formula. Another piece of funding equity and working toward funding equity in Colorado is making sure that students who attend public charter schools are funded fairly and equitably as well. And we saw 3 wins in this particular space this year. So for the first time in our state's history, we fully funded CSI mill levy equalization for state authorized charter schools. So this is when the state kicks in dollars to match local mill levy revenue that state authorized charters can't always access. Second, the JBC eliminated a pot of funding called the At-Risk Supplemental, which was designed to help charter schools serve kids living in poverty. But we were able to reinstate that fund and phase it out rather than completely eliminate it in 1 year, as we increase the investment that the state is making in all children who are living in poverty via the new school funding formula. And third, the state expanded the moral obligation program. So this program gives charter schools the state's backing when they go on the private market to borrow up to a certain amount to build or renovate new school facilities. Having the state's backing means that those charter schools can get much better financing rates, which ultimately helps them serve their students better. So this particular one increased the amount in that program from 100 or $750 million to $1 billion. Big success. The next place that we spent a lot of time thinking and working this legislative session was in supporting Hunger Free Colorado's work to sustain the Healthy School Meals for All program. As a reminder, the Healthy School Meals for All program does exactly what it sounds like, ensures that all students in a particular school or a particular community receive meals, and that helps reduce the stigma of free and reduced price lunch in schools and really does good things for school climates and the school experience. Um, the Healthy School Meals for All program was originally enacted in 2022 via Prop FF on the ballot, but the amount of funding that Prop FF brings in for the program is smaller than the demand for the program. The program has been really successful and a lot of schools have opted in. So we were facing about a $50 million shortfall for the program. So this year, the legislature passed two separate bills to address this issue. The first is House Bill 1274. We testified in support, and this bill refers two additional measures to the 2025 ballot for voters to weigh in on. One is a ballot measure to retain more of the dollars that are brought in by Prop FF, and the other is to increase the amount of revenue that the state collects from taxes to help pay for the program. However, if those two ballot measures do not pass, the JBC also passed Senate Bill 25214 to restructure the program and to make it sustainable even if we don't see the funding increases from the two ballot measures in November 2025. This is a really technical, complicated bill, but mostly what this means is if the two ballot measures fail to pass in 2025, um, the Healthy School Meals for All program will be restructured and will only serve schools that qualify for the community eligibility provision or schools that serve a student population of which 40% or more qualifies for free and reduced price lunch. Big success and big thanks to our partner Hunger Free for helping out here or leading here. And then last but not least, we worked on supporting students in having better school climate and school learning experiences through the passage of House Bill 25-1248. Big shout out to Disability Law Colorado for leading on this important and complicated bill. What this bill does is set up new guardrails and reporting requirements for schools when they use restraint and seclusion on students. It sets up some prohibitions, identifies some exceptions to the prohibitions and the conditions that a local education provider must follow if using restraint or seclusion. It requires that local education providers ensure that the people who are doing restraint and seclusion are properly trained. But most importantly to the campaign, this bill requires that all schools establish an annual review process and stronger reporting process for the use of restraint and seclusion in schools. All of that data will be built into the school district climate reports, which is a reporting practice that the campaign worked to establish in 2022 to help the state better understand and someday improve the learning experiences and school climates across the state. So that's what we managed to get done in K-12 this year, and I'm going to pass it back to Heather to talk about early childhood.
Thanks, Maddie. I always love hearing Maddie talk about our K-12 work and making things that are very complicated make sense. So thank you. Early childhood, there's always stuff going on. Our first thing actually on our list is a little bit of a crossover between early childhood and youth programming, and that is a bill that modernized the Tony Gramsci Youth Services Program, or TGYS. TGYS is a prevention program and it's a grant program that the state runs through the Department of Human Services. And this bill, Senate Bill 25197, was meant to update the 31-year-old TGYS program to expand access for small nonprofit organizations, to reduce some administrative burdens, and really streamline some of the responsibilities of the TGYS board. And we worked with an amazing group of organizations that are TGYS grantees to really identify some of the challenges and identify some areas where we can make it a little bit easier for small organizations to participate in this program. So these changes that happened, they're all pretty technical, but they will help more community-based programs access critical funding to prevent youth crime, violence, and child abuse and neglect. So we are excited about those changes. Our second area, and this is one of our sustaining and expanding universal pre-K is one of our overarching early childhood goals for the campaign. And we are pretty excited about where we're going with UPK. I did mention earlier that we're third in the nation for preschool enrollment, so that feels like a big success. But during this session, we really worked hard to protect the UPK program from any hostile amendments and changes. There was a bill that would have made some pretty big changes to the program that we worked on. More exciting, I guess, is that the legislature did approve a funding increase for the Universal Pre-K program that includes an increase to provider rates, more support for our local coordinating organizations, and expanding capacity to meet the growing demand of the Universal Pre-K program. So there are two funds that go into UPK, and the Joint Budget Committee put in $6.8 million of cash funds in order to increase the UPK program, and that includes $1.7 million for the local coordinating organizations. So we are excited about that and really grateful to the Joint Budget Committee for that. We also have a priority around protecting childcare access and affordability. And during this session, legislators really worked hard to protect our childcare subsidies with the Child Care Assistance Program, encouraging continued support for early childhood programs. So we have heard a lot about CCAP and some of the budget challenges around CCAP. And I will say, while we're very grateful for where we got this session, we still have a long way to go, and there are a lot of challenges. A lot of counties have frozen their CCAP programs, and there's some federal changes that are really good, but need to be funded. So for this session, the legislature did put in $21.7 million, including $5 million of general fund, $2.4 million of cash funds from local contributions, and $14.3 million of federal CCDF funds into our CCAP program. And that funding supports our state supervised, county administered CCAP program, which provides low-cost child care services for eligible families. In addition to our Child Care Assistance Program funding, we did also work on a bill that passed, Senate Bill 25004, that cuts some of the fees and provides financial transparencies for families searching for childcare. So that bill allows fees like primarily waitlist fees and application fees to be refunded to families after 6 months if their child is not enrolled in a program, and then increases the transparency regarding a lot of the fees charged in addition to tuition. So it just requires that those are disclosed when a family enrolls in a program. Finally, early intervention, another issue that was pretty prominent in the press during the legislative session. So the Early Intervention Colorado program provides developmental supports and services to families with children birth through 2 years of age who have developmental needs. So they do assessments and then provide services. So you may have seen in the news that the early intervention program, it was $4 million underfunded for this current fiscal year that we were in, and then projecting continued funding gaps that probably will be bigger than $4 million in future years. So the legislature did come up with a short-term funding fix and ensured that families will not lose services during this fiscal year. And most importantly to us, ensuring that services to children on Medicaid do not get cut immediately. There are still a lot of conversations going on around early intervention and how to shore up that program, which we know is critical for families. And, earlier is easier, and the sooner we can get services through early intervention to families, the more success we will see for kids. So we are continuing to participate in some of those conversations and look forward to continuing to have conversations around this with the legislature next year. outside of bills and legislative goings on, we are also watching a couple of third-party evaluations that are happening. There are two ongoing external evaluations, and they are focused on improving the UPK program and looking at the Department of Early Childhood as a whole. So we are wanting to ensure that we maintain some core services, but also that we are pushing the department and the program, the UPK program, to provide the highest quality services and have the most support possible moving forward. So we are part of the review steering committee for the department, and we have been a part of a lot of what's happening around the UPK review and ensuring that that process is meaningful, actionable, and inclusive. And we're really looking forward to seeing some of the outcomes of these evaluations because I think they are going to help us really shape our legislative agenda in the future, and really want to make sure that we are breaking down silos within the department and enabling some effective blending and braiding of funds between all of these different programs. We want to ensure that data is accessible and actionable and transparent so that we can measure our progress and really inform decisions. And then, lastly, just strengthening our early childhood system in Colorado to make sure that we are continually meeting the changing needs of families while driving equitable outcomes. And then finally, we are hiring. This is our mid webinar ad, but the Children's Campaign is looking for a new director of early childhood policy, and John just put the link into our posting. And we are looking forward to finding a fabulous team member, and there will be more to come on early childhood advocacy this summer as we transition to a new staff person and start doing new and bigger work around early childhood. So we're very excited about that. So if you are interested, please apply. If you know somebody who would be fabulous, please send it to them. And I think this is my last slide. I am now going to hand this over to Sarah, who is pinch hitting for Tony to talk about health. Sarah.
Thanks, Heather. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here this morning. My name is Sarah Barnes, and I'm the Senior Director of Policy here at the Children's Campaign. And yes, I am standing in for our fabulous Health Policy Director this morning, Tony Sarge, to share some exciting wins in our health portfolio from the legislative session this year. Before we start, I'll just mention, as many of you know, that Colorado's Health Department, the Healthcare Policy and Financing Department, or HCPF, is actually the largest slice of Colorado's budget. So the health world and Medicaid in particular were really the topic of many discussions this session during joint budget committee meetings and at the legislature. But thankfully, we have some great champions in the legislature and at the JBC, and they worked really diligently this session to prevent major cuts to benefits and coverage for kids. And so we're going to highlight a couple of those wins today. The first win was that we protected funding for the Child Health Plan Plus, or CHP Plus program in Colorado. Families that don't receive health insurance through their employer or don't make enough money to afford to purchase private insurance can either enroll in Medicaid or CHP Plus, and this helps them access some of those critical health services. Last year in Colorado, close to 40% of kids were enrolled in public health insurance through Medicaid or CHP Plus. And at the end of the pandemic era policy of continuous eligibility coverage in 2024, we saw a shift of increased numbers of kids enrolled in CHP Plus, which covers families with incomes up to 265% of the federal poverty level. Last year, we actually had more kids enrolled in CHP Plus in Colorado than ever before. This was almost double from the previous year. And because of that, defending this critical program in the budget this year was more important than ever. Through strong advocacy, the over 100,000 kids who are enrolled in Colorado in CHP Plus had their funding maintained for the coming fiscal year. So we're very excited about that. The second budget win that we want to share in the health portfolio with you today, as many of you know, January 1st of this year marked the start of Medicaid coverage through Cover All Coloradans for children and pregnant people, regardless of their immigration status in Colorado. These newly eligible populations now get the same support and services provided through Medicaid and CHIP, including preventive care, well child visits, oral health care, behavioral health care, family planning services, and prenatal and postpartum care if they qualify based on their income. We know the cost of healthcare isn't continuing to go up, and we saw enrollment numbers higher than we expected to see them in this program. And so this was also a point of discussion at the legislature for potential cuts. Through hearing after hearing, we fought to keep this program fully funded, which resulted in a huge budget win this session. The program received $26 million more in funding toward this program than the original $4 million that was originally projected when the bill passed in 2021. As of this week, we have over 13,000 kids and almost 4,000 pregnant adults who have access to health coverage now, thanks to this new expansion. The final success story we want to share in this year's budget for health was maintaining funding and the current timeline to begin continuous Medicaid eligibility for babies and toddlers from birth to age 3, which will begin and is set to begin on January 1st of 2026. As a reminder, this means that kids who have Medicaid coverage who are under the age of 3 won't need to re-enroll on an annual basis. This ensures a smoother continuity of care for families with the youngest kids. This critical program was on the table to be either cut or delayed this session, but thanks to strong advocacy and champions in the Joint Budget Committee, we are continuing to work on implementation of this program on time for next year. So we're very excited about that. Lastly, we just want to share a quick note on House Bill 1297 this session, which did not pass. This bill would have proposed an increased fee on insurance companies to ensure continued funding for the OmniSalud and reinsurance programs for folks to access private insurance coverage. OmniSalud specifically is a program that allows undocumented folks to purchase private health equity and health insurance plans. Unfortunately, this bill did not pass this session, and so more conversations and advocacy will be needed to ensure that these programs are fully funded next year. And I will stop there. And I'm actually going to now turn us to our updates on economic security this session and share some exciting wins for you in this area of our work as well. The first, we are really excited to share that one of our priority bills passed this session, House Bill 1279. This bill will provide Colorado with more comprehensive standardized data in our TANF program. And as a reminder, TANF serves families with kids who have very low incomes through cash assistance payments, as well as other types of supports. TANF in Colorado is a county administered program, so we don't currently have standardized data on spending in large portions of the program, or much standardized data at all on outcomes or efficacy of how we spend many of these funds. House Bill 1279 will help us better understand how TANF funds are spent in Colorado, how families are served, and what the outcomes are of our spending to ensure that we really maximize these dollars toward decreasing extreme child poverty. This bill is also going to require the state to develop some standards around outcomes and levels of effectiveness for services that are provided to families using TANF dollars. It will assess the impact of some recent policy changes that were made to the TANF program and how those are impacting families. And lastly, it will require the state to review and recommend ways to update eligibility for cash assistance in the program in Colorado. That eligibility criteria has not been updated in decades. Another great win for families who are eligible for the TANF program this year, as Heather mentioned, is that we were able to protect a cash assistance increase for families. During the session, the Works Allocation Committee, which is made up of a group of county representatives, made recommendations to the Joint Budget Committee to pause increases to cash assistance for TANF families that were due to go into effect in July. Just as a reminder, basic cash assistance payments are modest, and eligible families who receive them are living far below the poverty level. They're living in extreme poverty. As an example, a family who has one parent and 2 kids in the household has to make less than $14,000 a year to qualify for these payments. We want to make sure we have better data on how TANF funds are spent in Colorado, which we will now be able to get through House Bill 1279, before we make any changes to this program that would impact families. We are really excited that a 4.8% cost of living adjustment increase will go into effect on July 1st of this year. This is going to mean an average increase of $24 a month for families who receive these payments to help them cover the costs of really basic necessities. The last update I'd like to share with you today is that we're really excited that a critical tax credit that provides income supports to families with kids was also protected this session. The Family Affordability Tax Credit is a refundable, means-tested tax credit that provides up to $3,200 per child under the age of 6 and up to $2,400 per child ages 6 to 16 for eligible families. This credit is expected to make Colorado's child poverty rate the lowest in the country and 40% lower than the second lowest state. So it was really doing great and amazing things for kids in our state. We are really excited that the JBC worked quickly at the end of session to protect the credit through House Bill 1335 so that eligible families can continue to access this credit when they're eligible in future tax years. And we're really grateful to the leadership of our partners at Geary Community, who helped lead this coalition, and many of our partners who worked to make sure that this happened before the end of session this year. And with that, I think I'm turning it back to Heather.
Thanks, Sarah. That's great. I haven't seen any questions in the Q&A, but I'll just give a second here. If you put a question in the chat and we missed it, if you have a question you want to stick in the chat right now, we would love to try and answer any of those. So pop them in there and we will keep moving forward. But if I see a question, we will come back. And we're just going to wrap up here real quick. Oh, Vernon. How are we feeling? Are we feeling great now that the session is over? We are feeling really great. I would answer that by saying that we feel very fortunate to have the legislature that we have. And like I said earlier, the Joint Budget Committee that we have. This session really was kind of scary walking into it and saying, we know there's going to be a big budget shortfall. When there's no money, that means it's hard to get some other things done that might be priorities. And we fared really well for kids in Colorado. And we know that our legislature sees that as a priority, that our community partners see that as a priority. And so I think we're feeling good about being on a great team throughout this state. And then also just feeling good that we are able to take a breath now and start planning for next year. So we get to take a little bit of a break, and then we are headed into figuring out some of the solutions to problems that are still here. So, oh, thanks for saluting us. Did we do something around Tabor? Sarah, you might be the best to answer that question. There were a lot of efforts, but why don't you talk about where we ended up?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I actually appreciate you asking it, honey, because I think something that's true is that many of the budget constraints that we're facing in our state and the fights that we have to make sure that kids and families in our state have what they need are underpinned by the challenges that Tabor presents in our state to keep us from being able to do that. There were some efforts this session to address Tabor in a few different ways through some joint resolutions, including something that could have been referred to the ballot to address some parts of Tabor. That would have allowed a lawsuit to move forward around the constitutionality. Those efforts were not ultimately successful in the legislature, but the Children's Campaign, as well as many of our really close partners, are continuing to work toward removing the constraints that Tabor puts on our state to provide the public investments that we need to provide to kids and families in our state to make sure that they can thrive.
Thanks, Sarah. There's a lot of work to be done around Tabor, and we will continue to be in parts of those conversations. Rebecca, I see your question about the next steps in addressing the quality of food for free lunches. I think I would point to our friends at Hunger Free Colorado, but to say that the two pieces of legislation that passed are probably the next steps, right? Making sure that those ballot initiatives pass and that more funding goes into the program. But beyond that, I would say check in with Hunger Free Colorado, and we really rely on them to help us set our strategy around free lunch and quality of food for free lunches. Okay, I see people are putting questions in the Q&A. That's very exciting. Aisha, will some of these wins codify access for these programs, even if there are federal cuts, such as TANF, Coverall, Coloradans, etc.? The answer is complicated, and I'm going to actually pass that over to Sarah again to answer.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I see a similar question in the chat. I think in addition to the fights that we have and will continue to have at our state level to protect and make adequate public investments in programs, we also, many of us, I think, are probably keenly aware of some real threats at the federal level right now across many of the programs that support kids and families in Colorado. And we know that those cuts that are being proposed, if they come through, would have a particularly dramatically negative impact in Colorado due to our budget constraints that we already face. We would not be able to fill those gaps. So that's definitely one of the biggest concerns that we have in Colorado. We're uniquely perhaps unable to fill those gaps in Colorado due to our constitutional restraints around collecting and raising revenue. The programs we mentioned this session did not specifically codify access in the face of federal cuts. That will continue to be a fight that we and our partners face here in the state, is protecting Colorado's gains and many innovative things we've done in the state to support kids and families in the face of some of these potential federal cuts. And as our session is wrapping up, I think many of us are turning toward the advocacy that we need to continue to do now to fight against these cuts happening across programs at the federal level.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to respond. Erica asked, I believe federal funding was referenced when speaking of universal pre-K. Is this at risk, or is there a commitment behind it? And I think I probably talked about federal funding with the Child Care Assistance Program, actually. First of all, I think when we talk about federal funds, I don't think that we can, at this point in time, ever say they're going to be there. We 100% know, and we have a lot of confidence that those funds are going to come. We're at a very strange time, and it's just very uncertain in terms of what will and what will not come. That said, with the Child Care Assistance Program, even prior to this administration and sort of the chaos that's happening now, we already were in trouble with that program. And there are federal funds that come, a big chunk of federal funds that come to the state to fund childcare assistance. However, I referenced that there was a rule change last year that really made some changes, or will make some changes that are good for families and good for providers. However, they were unfunded. And so as we move forward thinking about universal pre-K and the Child Care Assistance Program, we really have to be thinking about how these programs work together, how we can blend and braid funding, and how we do some really big, important advocacy with our congressional delegation to ensure they understand the importance of those federal funds to ensuring that kids can have childcare and that parents can go to work. And this is a place where you're probably going to hear a lot from us over the next few months. And it's going to be something that will be a priority with our new early childhood policy director. And then Brandy, I see that you want to know how you can help. Um, and um, and Maddie answered in the chat, but I'm also going to say, so Brandy's question is, how can we as individuals and community leaders support the work of the campaign always and in between sessions? And Maddie gave a great answer about how we can support with some advocacy. I will say there are a lot of ways that this work happens when it's not our legislative session. So I would really encourage a couple of things. I'm going to show a slide in just a minute here with the QR code to just join our newsletter so that you know what's happening. But there are other ways as well. So we have a lot of community coalitions that people can tie into. We also we do different kinds of webinars and meetings throughout the year. We just got off of a statewide tour where some of our staff were going from community to community to hear what is happening throughout the state, what are the concerns at the local level, how should we be addressing those, and if we're coming to your community, please engage with us on those. If we're not coming to your community and you want to invite us, please invite us. And I think the other piece is I would be remiss if I didn't say, please donate to us. We are a nonprofit and we do this work because we have funds that come from our local foundations or from individuals that allow us to do it. We do not have any government funds at the Children's Campaign, and we feel very fortunate about that because it allows us to do the work that we do in the way that we need to do it without any kinds of constraints. And so that's a way that anybody can support us at any time. And whether it's you give us, $5 or $10, or you can be a monthly donor, I would give the pitch for that. I think that's all the questions, unless I missed any in the chat. If you have questions after the webinar, please feel free to shoot us an email. We are always happy to try and answer questions and let people know what's going on. I know it's really difficult when you don't do this work every day to keep track of all the moves that are happening at the legislature or in community programs and all kinds of things. So let's go to the next slide. And oh, we have our Kids Count release, another way you can engage with us. Our Kids Count release is coming up on May 28th, and it is going to be a hybrid event. So wherever you are in the state, please join us. In Colorado or in Denver, we will be at the Colorado Health Foundation, and then we will be on Zoom. It will be in English and in Spanish. And so it is on Wednesday, May 28th from 8:30 to 10:30. I think if you're online, it's from 9 to 10. That will be the actual presentation time, and we would love it if you all joined us. Kids Count is our snapshot of how children are doing in Colorado, and this will be all fresh data that will also sort of inform our policy agenda for next year, but also is really informed by a lot of these federal programs, and so we'll be talking a little bit more about that federal piece as well. And then it is our birthday, and it was actually our actual birthday earlier this week, so that was exciting. The Children's Campaign is 40 years old now, and we would love it if you joined us for our birthday party on September 24th at the Hangar Club in Lowry, and there will be more information coming out on that, but we are working right now on securing sponsors and planning a fun party. And then lastly here, please sign up for our newsletter. This is what I mentioned just a minute ago about keeping up to speed on the latest happenings in our state for Colorado's kids. and we will continue sending that out, and we will have updates both from sort of the policy work that we do outside of the session, but also really informing how we are planning for the 2026 legislative session. So scan that and follow us. You also follow us on our social media. These are all the ways that we make sure that we are pushing information out. And then finally, thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our team that presented today. Shout out to John, who is our webinar master behind the scenes and putting in all of our links. Hopefully this was a helpful use of your time. And if you have questions that you think of later, please let us know. And we will look forward to another year of fighting for Colorado's kids. So thanks so much.